I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we're going to play around with some yarn that's going to have a hint of rainbow flair, and I am so excited. But before we jump in, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to today's lab partner, Emily Harris. Emily, thank you so much for being my lab partner today. Now, the yarn I want to dye today is mostly going to be one color, and then it's going to have a little rainbow section at one end. So then when you knit, you get these sort of rainbow pops throughout everything. And I'm drawing inspiration from the tutorial that I first looked at many years ago, the first time I tried GuarGum. And this is the Unicorn Farts tutorial by Tomboy Knits, I think. And they showed painting a colorway using Kool-Aid and also talked about mixing Guar Gum as a thickener to use. Now, when I play with Guar Gum, I tend to apply it with a foam brush. Here, they use squeeze bottles. That's all okay. The goal is we want to create this type of colorway that has a pop of rainbow. And there's even swatches on their website so you can see how that works up. I've been wanting to dye my own version of this for years, and so I'm really excited to do this today for Emily. And I'm thinking bright aqua with the pops of rainbow, but we'll see how things come together once we mix up those colors. But first, before I transform my kitchen from a kitchen to a dyer's kitchen, let's go mix up our Guar Gum solution so we can have the dyes thickened. To create our dye thickener, so that way we can paint our small section of rainbow, I am going to dissolve some Guar Gum into some water using food safe equipment because I don't have a dedicated dye magic bullet mixer, and using some kind of blender is the easiest way to get this Guar Gum solution. I started making my Guar Gum stock at a ratio of 1/2 teaspoon of Guar Gum per 1 cup of water. When I started making this particular one, the solution seemed a little bit runnier than I expected, but it does thicken more over time, I think, as that Guar Gum really dissolves. So you may need to give it a minute before it feels really thick. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because my plan was to thin out these solutions more anyway, but I let these original stocks sit for about 15 minutes. Now, the reason why I'm comfortable using my kitchen cooking equipment to set all this up when I'm going to be using acid dyes is that I'm using fresh food safe takeout containers to add the Guar Gum to. Everything I'm using here is for food prep. Once I'm done making my Guar Gum, I will clean my dishes, load the dishwasher, and then set my kitchen up to use only dedicated dye equipment. And so the containers with the Guar Gum in it will then become dedicated dye containers in the end. And so that's how all that goes down. The Unicorn Farts tutorial that I've referenced in passing, they use Guar Gum at a ratio of 1 teaspoon of Guar Gum to 4 cups of water, or 1/4 teaspoon of Guar Gum per 1 cup, which is half of what I've mixed here. And I typically mix things a little bit thicker in case I want to add liquid dyes, then I can dilute it. But I'm going to go ahead and mix 1 cup of that stock I just made with a cup of water to have a thinner solution to see how I feel about that, because I'm going to mix the dye powders directly into the Guar Gum eventually. And to remind you why we want a thickener for our dyes, if you apply just liquid dyes onto yarn, it's going to wick through the yarn. It's going to bleed through and travel. And so if we were to paint a rainbow, very likely the yellow would get lost because the orange and the green on either side would probably travel through and bleed onto the yellow. Which isn't to say we're not going to have bleeding when we apply these colors the way I'm planning on doing it today, but having a thickener helps the dyes sort of stay exactly where you've placed them. And so that's why we're using a thickener today. The yarn we're going to dye today is Knit Picks Twill Fingering. This super bouncy yarn is 100% superwash merino wool. I think I've only dyed it a few times, but the worsted weight version of this yarn is one of my favorites. And I'm going to go ahead and pre-soak this in plain water with no additional acid for about 30 minutes. But of course, before the pre-soak, I am going to add a removable nylon zip tie onto the yarn to use it as an extra tie. This helps prevent tangling because if the yarn is in solution, maybe you'd pick it up from here and that could separate, you could pull things. If you always lift from the zip tie, then you can avoid creating tangles later on during the dyeing or washing process. I want our main color today to be bright aqua. And so for this, we don't need Guar Gum because we're gonna dye most of the yarn this color. So I took the bright aqua dye, measured out 1 gram of it, and then dissolved that in hot tap water because we're gonna use all of this dye on not quite 300 grams of yarn because part of that yarn will remain undyed, but pretty close to 300 grams of yarn. In my dye pot, I have 24 cups of water. I'm gonna add our bright aqua dye. Ooh, there's a little bit of green at the bottom. Sometimes colors are a mixture of multiple pigments, and some pigments dissolve faster than others. And we're gonna stir things up really, really well. And then when it comes to having the yarn in the pot, but having some of the yarn out, I realized I got this slotted spoon in with my dedicated dye stuff, which I don't use for anything. But look, it fits on the edge of the pot and then doesn't move. So I can add the yarn and sort of lean the yarn over the spoon versus leaning it on the outside of the pot, and that has me really excited. Now, again, I haven't added acid yet, but let's go over to the stove and start heating this up. The reason why we are starting with no acid is so that way I can try to get some of the color all over the yarn, but we're gonna leave some of the yarn out. And I want to be able to move things around, move it through, and I gotta be careful that I leave some of the yarn out. Oh, I started to be a little too vigorous with my dipping, forgetting what I'm trying to do. Now, I literally just turned the heat on, so things are not that hot yet. Now, I'm gonna raise the yarn up as we start to add acid. So I'm gonna do 1, 2, 3, 4. Oops, too much, Rebecca. 5, 6 tablespoons of white vinegar. And I'm moving the yarn in the middle of each addition of acid to stir things up, to continue to make sure we have color all over our yarn. And so we're gonna have some pastel colors near our white section. We can always hand paint some of this aqua color on as needed. Now, okay. Now I'm gonna come and lean the yarn over. I have to think about this because I don't want it to dip in. Seemed like a good idea. Aha, there we go. Because then I can have it a little bit off to the edge as well. And actually, what I'm gonna do, just so that way things don't fall in, is I am going to secure these zip ties to the handle with another zip tie, which you can barely see. And let me rotate everything. Okay, so now you can see that we actually have a very reasonable amount of yarn removed. I have a feeling things are gonna strike pretty quickly. But again, I can bring in, and I will have more of this aqua color that we could always paint on to help surround our rainbow. And even though I had just secured this, I can even move the yarn out, bring it in, get a little bit more color over there. I mean, the color has mostly struck to the yarn at this point. Oh no, oh no, oh no. You know, I was like, oh, this is gonna be a great idea. It's not gonna move. And then I promptly move it. Rebecca, you need to just be cool. Be cool. Okay, we got that held up. We're gonna have this spread out. And I'm now gonna want to try to not move the yarn that I have up there because I don't want it to fall in. I don't want to mess this up. And as for how long I'm going to heat it, I'm going to go ahead and set a timer for 20 minutes. I have a feeling that most of the color will strike quickly, but since things aren't hot yet, we're gonna need some time. You still can't really see that I have these zip tied to the handle, but it's all good. It's all good. I'll see you in about 20 minutes. It has been 20 minutes. I'm gonna unattach this from the handle. Well, look, there's like a hint of color left in here, but not much. And yeah, almost no color. There's a tiny bit left, but what I'm gonna do at this stage, since we have no acid in the top of the yarn yet, is just give this a good dunk in here, so that way we're adding acid to that yarn. Yes, maybe we got a hint of color there, but we're gonna be adding so much more color, it shouldn't make a difference. All right, I'm gonna turn off the heat. Things aren't that hot, but I do wanna let the yarn cool before we bring it over to the countertop to dye our rainbow layer, which I'm very, very excited about. And as for this dyebath, I'll remove some of the liquid and then put a steamer basket in, and we'll reuse the same pot as our steamer basket once we're ready to start hand painting, once everything is cool. I just started adding some of our more dilute Guar Gum mixture to these cups. You can see a little bit of Aqua in this one because I do want to make 1 cup with bright Aqua as well. But I'm not measuring, I'm more going by feel and instinct. And I'm gonna do the same thing when I put on my deluxe rubber respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves back on, and add a little bit of some acid dye powder to each cup, and then stirring things up really thoroughly. The 6 colors besides the bright Aqua that I'm using are Cherry Bomb, Blazing Orange, Brilliant Yellow, Emerald Green, Sapphire Blue, and Electric Violet. And once again, I'm not measuring, I'm just trying to make our, quote, paints here. Here I quickly swatched the 6 colors, and I think we're pretty good. I'm gonna add a little bit more dye powder off camera to the orange and the red to beef them up a little bit, but otherwise, I think we're about ready to go to dye the yarn. But notice how little those colors are spreading out. That's because of the Guar Gum. My work surface is always protected with a shower curtain, but I just put down some plastic wrap because after I paint on the rainbows, I'm gonna want to be able to wrap things up so that way I can avoid transfer of the rainbow onto the rest of the yarn. And I could try to do them one at a time, but I think I want to attempt to do them all at once, when the exception might be some of the area where I want more bright Aqua. Now I could always do this in stages where I dye, oh no, no. Did I just get that all over? No, I did not get it all over. I got it on just a little bit. I got it all over my hand. Oh, that's what I get for not wearing gloves. Oh, there's a little bit on there. Okay, thankfully the green is very, very close to Aqua. And so hopefully that's the only little oops. Oh my God. Okay. As I pull these out. And okay, my plan is to have things set up like this, but I'm gonna need to rearrange everything so I don't make a mess. So I'm gonna start over and be right back. I was too close to the edge before. Okay, I'm gonna glove up and we're gonna start painting the colors on. Okay, if we're gonna do red, orange, yellow. So then our yellow needs to be about centered. I'm basically just marking approximately where I'm gonna want these colors to go. But you can see how I'm adding this color and it's not spreading out ridiculously. And that is because of the thickener in here. And I do think I could have gone even thinner with the thickener, but it's working and I know it's a proportion that will rinse out well. So that's not gonna be a problem. Now, I'm gonna want this yellow to be whiter, but I'm just sort of marking things out, getting a feel, figuring out if we're gonna need to get any more color. Now I have a feeling like, am I using the right orange that I wanted? Yeah, blazing orange. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. And there might be some areas that are not going to be perfect, and that is going to be okay. But don't worry, I'm not planning on leaving that white space. Now, I know I already mixed up some bright aqua, but I may or may not need it, depending on how things go with our red. And so I may just use a little bit over there, or maybe not. So we will see how we feel once we increase. I will say I have mixed way more dye of these rainbow colors than I think we're gonna need. I am gonna need to do multiple passes over each of these sections because we're not going through very many layers. But so far, so good. And okay, I have a feeling the red's gonna need to extend back towards me a little bit. The orange could go towards the yellow. The yellow, I'm gonna go ahead and mark further. You'll notice that I'm using a hand on the yarn. That's to keep it from lifting up too much. Okay, and let's start at the far end with our purple. It's just to get the placement that we want and hopefully not dripping like you've been watching me do. Now see over here, this I went a little further into the white area than maybe I wanted, but again, I have that bright aqua mixed. We can bring that aqua in to help cover that area. Now, this is not going to be perfect for planned pooling. That is not what my goal is to create here. There is going to be some variability, but my hope is to have in just about every section a beautiful rainbow that'll pop against the teal backdrop. Okay, yes, this is working. And the goal is for things to be approximately the same size, but we may have some differences and we're gonna be okay with that as well. But you know what? Okay, the orange, after contacting the yarn, the orange is turning much brighter. Now, yes, we have some deep patches in here that could be some dye powder that we can work through, but it's looking less burnt and it's looking a little brighter. So I'm gonna keep going, extending these stripes, flipping the yarn, adding more color until I'm satisfied with the color coverage. But once again, notice that the colors are not moving through the yarn much further from where I've placed them. And that's because of that thickener. If the thickener weren't there, they would be spreading all over the place. All right, we have a little bit of color transfer. That was my fault from getting some color on a brush and moving it up. And there was one big error when I used red on the orange section, which is a bit regrettable. But I think I'm pretty happy with the coverage, and I'm now stacking all of that yarn on top of itself. So that way I can wrap it up. Because we're gonna wanna steam set things and try to keep the rainbows separate from the rest of our yarn as best we can. It's gonna be a little hard. So I think, so we have it wrapped, and I'm gonna bring things over to the steamer basket and you can watch me struggle and try to do this. Actually, I'm gonna get some more plastic wrap to wrap around some of those areas just to make myself feel a little better. And if I seem nervous or hesitant, it truly is not about this particular project. I had a pretty big oops in another project today, and even it wasn't even a yarn project, and that has shaken my confidence up a little bit. But yeah, more plastic wrap to surround these dye areas. Okay, now to the steamer basket. Okay, we are gonna try to keep the dyed yarn as separate from everything else as possible. I really need to get a new steam pan, one that has a steamer insert so that way I can have things flat. That is something I think I need. Okay, but I'm now gonna steam set this for 30 minutes. I could have added more acid onto the section. I kind of regret that I didn't, but I noticed that the colors seemed to be striking pretty fast because there wasn't a lot of transfer back onto my gloves as I was moving the dyes through. So anyway, we're gonna heat this for 30 minutes. Let's talk about ethics in the indie dyer community. In my opinion, it is not ethical for you to go to someone's shop, look at a colorway, and then try to replicate or reverse engineer that colorway to create a dupe, especially if you also sell hand-dyed yarn. When it comes to creating your colorways for your shop, get inspiration from the world around you. Art, movies, television, things like that. Don't pull your color inspiration from yarn that someone else is selling. Now, two dyers can come up with similar colorways in a vacuum, and they may even have similar names. I'm sure there's so many pumpkin spice latte themed colorways out there, or maybe even candy cane. There's some names that are very common, and just because two people might have a few similar colorways doesn't mean that one dyer copied another. And in fact, when I used to do dye-alongs, I shared the yarn that people created because sometimes in a complete vacuum, people would create colorways that were very, very similar from the same inspiration photo. I film tutorials and give recipes. I tell you the yarn brands, the dye brands, the amount of dye I'm using in my videos, and I'm inviting you to replicate that. Similarly, by posting a tutorial, I think that this unicorn farts tutorial is something that people were invited to recreate and to make their own versions of. Most dyers, when they share images of their work, are not inviting people to copy them. And it's not really appropriate to reach out to another dyer to say, hey, what dyes did you use on this? Where do you get your supplies? Unless they specifically invite those questions, which I invite those questions. Ask me, I'm happy to help you. But I hope that the distinction is there. And I also think that it is okay to see a gorgeous heavy speckled yarn and look at it and think, ooh, I wonder if I could create that kind of effect on yarn myself, and then do that with your own spin and your own colors. I think it's okay to have inspiration from something you see. Just don't go seek out other people's yarn for your inspiration, except for me. Or other people that teach and do tutorials. They're inviting you to be inspired by what they're doing. And so I hope that these differences make sense. It's been 30 minutes and this yarn is by far the best part of my whole day. I am so happy with it. And I haven't seen it yet. But I'm going to turn off the steamer basket, and I don't want to press my luck. Sometimes if you have an oops, then you might want to just stop doing things for the day because, you know, one mistake, distraction can lead to more. And so I'm going to go ahead and let it cool in here without moving it because I have a feeling that the rainbows are going to be gorgeous and I don't want to mess it up. Normally I would set it aside in a steam pan and let it cool that way, but I'm gonna let it cool for a while here before I move it, just because I'm nervous, because I'm being extra cautious, because I don't want to ruin this. Oh man, oh man. Oh. You'll know the oops when you see it. It'll be in a video, like in the next month or so. Oh man. But Emily, it's nothing to do with your yarn, I promise. Since I don't want you to worry and I decided to already post a short about it, I was doing something in one of my dye pans and I scorched it. And so if you have any tips on how to remove those scorch marks, please let me know. I have scrubbed and scrubbed and scrubbed, and I mean the good news is I'm seeing little particles in the water, so maybe that means more is coming off. But yeah. Thankfully, no yarn was harmed. I was doing something completely non-yarn in it at the time, which makes me even angrier because I ruined my dye pan and it wasn't even for yarn. Oh. A few days later, And with a magic eraser, I have it all except for one little spot. There's one little spot there, but the magic eraser is working great. I just come over periodically, scrub for 20 seconds or so, and we keep getting improvement. So thank you everyone for all those suggestions. Like the fact that this has cooled off considerably. Oh, nope, that's still very warm. It's warm, but it's gonna be fine. Is it? Nope, too warm. You guys! It's like I touched the top and I was like, oh, that's cooled off a lot. And then, yeah, no, it's too warm. But I can remove the steamer basket and set the whole steamer basket aside, which is gonna make it cool off faster. Because you can see we still have steam here, even though the pot has been off for a while. Oh man. Now that our yarn is cool, we can get ready to wash it. Okay, and I'm gonna start actually by adding some dish soap. This is just some Blue Dawn in here, and then I'm gonna remove the plastic wrap, hopefully not dyeing my hands in the process. Okay. I like to be careful with that because sometimes there's still some dye on the plastic wrap. But soap in the water will help with any backstaining. Now, GuarGum does have like a slippery texture that you can feel on yarn. And so we are gonna wanna wash it really well, but it's a really, really good sign that we're not really seeing any color. Okay, maybe a hint of some red, but mostly we're not seeing any color come out of it. Maybe there's a hint, but I'm not worried about backstaining because it's so little. But we're gonna go ahead and do soap again. But I haven't even stepped back to appreciate the rainbow against this bright aqua backdrop. Oh, so pretty. Now the reason why you want to rinse the GuarGum out thoroughly is that you don't want it to solidify on the yarn. So I'm being slightly more vigorous here than I might otherwise be. But you'll notice that when I want to remove the yarn from the wash bath, I'm either lifting it from the zip ties directly, or if I'm not doing that, then I would try to grab, which you can't see it because of the soap, grab around the entire skeins like this and not try to separate them. And those are two things that can help avoid tangling, because I can manipulate this yarn, sort of like rub it a bit in the water, and it's not going to be tangled because I have a firm grasp of it over here. Now it helps that this yarn is superwash. Once again, it's 100% superwash merino wool, so it's not going to felt. But I don't even want to wait till it's dry. Just check out this fun rainbow, if I can have it all on camera. And I'm glad I see orange. I think I see orange in all of them. I still can't believe I mixed up the orange and the red. They look so similar that as a tip to myself, I should label my cups next time. But I'm gonna continue rinsing out with soap. Then I'm gonna put the yarn through my spin dryer, hang it up to dry, and we can look at the beautiful finished yarn. We're gonna go look at the finished yarn in a moment, but every June I do a fundraiser for the Trevor Project and dye up some rainbow yarn in a live stream to honor and celebrate Pride. And glancing back through some of the yarns I created in previous years, I created a colorway that is similar to the effect I was going with today. It was mostly black with a pop of a neon rainbow in it. But in that colorway, I hand painted on the colors and did not use GuarGum. And so when I went and steam set things, the colors moved during that steam setting process, and I lost some of the colors that were more at the edges. And had I used colors mixed with GuarGum, that wouldn't have happened. Now I think I need to play around with my dilutions of GuarGum a little bit to maybe get something that is a little bit runnier, but still holds where I place. But that's a conversation for another day. International Transgender Day of Visibility is about a week away, and I realized that dyeing a colorway inspired by the transgender pride flag gives me an opportunity to show another big perk of using a dye thickener. Here I am dyeing yarn using some of that same Guar Gum with a little bit of either baby blue eyes or flamingo pink, and I'm putting those pastel colors next to one another, but they're not mixing, because when I'm adding the dye mixed with Guar Gum onto the yarn, it's staying where I placed it and not bleeding away. And yes, I'm leaving a tiny bit of white in between them, but if this was just straight liquid dyes, the colors would absolutely bleed into one another and overlap. And so I'm able to get this blue, pink, and white flag-inspired colorway because of the dye thickener. This turned out so well. Even where I accidentally used red instead of orange for the orange section, adding some yellow and stuff to the orange helped that spread. Now, the colors are very distinct, almost like stripes. Even with Guar Gum, you can work on blending things together and layering the colors on top of each other. But I'm really excited that I didn't do that here. And one other thing that's worth adding is that even if the colors had bled a lot and bled into that aqua, we would never have lost the purple or the red here. If we had used a deeper color like black, maybe there's a chance that things could have disappeared, like the example I showed you previously, but that was with different dye types. And I guess what I'm also trying to say is that some dyes, like fluorescent dyes, spread more than others. Now, emerald green is a spreader of a color. And so the fact that it doesn't spread, we have the Guar Gum to thank. Now, I do want to play around with diluting the Guar Gum more, so that way it's a little bit easier to apply. Because you get the perk of the colors not wicking and spreading out. But it's also hard to work the colors, or not hard, but it's more time consuming to work the colors all the way through the yarn in a given place, just because they kind of stay put where you've originally put them. So I feel like that there's probably a happy medium, and I could have the dyes a little bit liquidier so I can work it through the yarn a little bit, but without it spreading, without me moving it through. I don't know if I'm making sense. Now, I probably could have added more of the bright aqua on the yarn. I think that I maybe should have diluted it a little more. It was a little bit concentrated, but I also don't really mind. I think that this is going to give these really fun rainbow pops on a tonal base. And Emily, I really hope you love this yarn. One other little note. Some of the colors here don't necessarily look like they're that sharp anymore, but that's not because of how it was dyed. That's because as I move the yarn, and I'll move this as an example, things shift relative to one another. I can try to move that back, and because of that movement, that is blending these transitions a little bit. But if you notice the color transition from the orange to the yellow, from the yellow to the green, there might be a little bit of softness in there, but really not very much blending. Side note, the way you twist yarn up can make a difference in how things look, but this is a colorway that I think it's hard to twist up to really show what is happening, and that's why pictures of the flat lays are so important. I'm going to retwist this one because I think I like that better. Emily Harris, thank you so much for being my lab partner for today's episode of Dyepot Weekly. I had so much fun dyeing this yarn, and I hope that you've enjoyed the video and all of the commentary that I've had along the way. With any kind of art, you just want to put your own kind of spin on things. And I'm really excited to play around with this more in the future. And if you want to learn how you become a lab partner like Emily, I will have links down in the video description to the listing in the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I love to dye rainbows. I love to play with color and experiment with different types of techniques for dyeing yarn. There are so many different ways to create rainbow colorways, and I know I haven't scratched the surface of all the different ways to do this. So if you have any particular rainbow requests, rainbow dyeing projects you would like to see me do, please let me know down in the comments section. I am thinking ahead to my June Trevor Project fundraiser, and I'm starting to brainstorm ideas of things I've done in the past that I want to recreate, and things that maybe I haven't done before. but I always welcome suggestions. And I'm going to go ahead and link the Trevor Project down below as well, in case you want to learn more about this organization that I am very happy to support. Please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. This is by far the biggest thing you can do to help support the content here. Thank you so much for watching.